the Traylors, and we're blending like bosses. Maybe you've heard these words like I have. You're not my real mom. You can't tell me what to do. Listen, we get it. Blended families don't come with instructions, but we're here to help you make a plan so you can blend like bosses.
Welcome back to Blending Like Bosses. We are Scott and Michelle Traylor, and we are a blended family of 8.
8. Cheers to 8.
Cheers.
All right.
We got this.
Guys, we've made it to episode 3. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us
That's awesome.
today. Before we jump into a really good show and some content that we think is going to be really helpful, I thought it would be good to kind of give a recap of how we got to this point today. So episode 1 was all about kind of our story. We introduced all the kids, and then we kind of shared our story of how we met, what we do for work, jobs, and all that kind of stuff. So if you haven't watched that yet and you want to know about this crazy group, that would be a good place to start in episode 1. And then we went into episode 2 with some suggestions about establishing guiding principles for your blended family.
So good.
Because, why did you say that was important?
Because you need a North Star. You need something that you can hold on to in the middle of a crisis.
Right, and it helps with decision making and all of that.
Right.
So we broke down our 5 guiding principles that we use for our family, and we think that would be a helpful one to take a look back at too. So go back and catch that episode if you didn't. And then today, episode 3, we are diving into, are you ready? Can I have a drum roll? The role of a step-parent. We think it's important to know your role.
Right, and we each have some different strengths that we bring.
That's true.
So
that's true.
So figuring that out, and it doesn't happen right from the very start.
It doesn't. It does take some finessing to do, because the reality is you're not the bio parent, and you won't ever be the bio parent, and there's really no substitution for that. There's no kind of dynamic equivalent.
Yeah, and if you can set those roles up early, kind of who does what, kind of how things work, the earlier you can kind of figure that out and start working on it, the easier it'll be in the future.
And then you'll know and feel more confident and secure when you get those crazy questions like I was talking about, like, you can't tell me what to do, and you're not my mom, or you're not my real mom, or you're the worst step parent ever, or all those things will start to easily roll off of you because you do know your role and your lane and your contribution to the family. It's good, right? Here we go. Let's go.
Let's jump in. Let's do this.
All right. The first role that we think, these are the 3 that we've come up with. Yeah. All right. So they're not prescriptive. We're not saying this is one size fits all, but when we put our heads together and we looked at our giftings, what we bring to the table, and we made it easy to remember because they're all words that start with C.
Right.
Because if you didn't know, I used to be an English teacher.
And I was a religion major, so that fits in with
how to do
sermons.
Sermon preps and all that. So we thought that these were kind of 3 bucket categories. When you're a step parent and you are not the bio parent, sometimes you still are a parent. Sometimes you came into the marriage or relationship and you haven't had any parenting experience at all. So that doesn't mean that you are just not credible. You don't have any authority. It doesn't mean any of those things. So we're going to share what we think 3 of your roles should be, could be. Maybe you'll agree. Maybe you'll come up with your own by the time we're done with the episode.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So number 1, as a step parent, you're a coach. You're a coach. Relationships take a ton of time. And like you were saying, blending does not happen overnight. And it is more of like a crock pot.
Right.
Can you explain that analogy?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think about blending, you think about would you put your hand in a blender?
I would not.
I would not. And so, but maybe a crock pot you might, right? Because it heats up slowly over time. The juices marinate, and that's how relationships work. They take time. You're making investments, and you're building trust. You're building shared memories, and you need all that in order to have those as a foundation in order to begin to parent.
So if you were if you were coaching like a sports team, okay, let's say it's the start of the season for a soccer team, and you are just getting to know this new team. Maybe you've had a couple kids, maybe you knew before, maybe all of them are new to you. You're learning names, you're learning personalities, you're learning likes and dislikes, you're learning about their behavior on and off the field, right? You're kind of like getting the lay of the land and starting to build and establish these relationships. And so I think that when you are a coach in the home, part of that is just earning that right through investments and through time in to be able to be a coach and to kind of come to the table, I'll just say with that hat, like wearing that hat. Celebrating their wins. Think about if you've ever been on a sports team before and you've had a coach. I know Scott played football a lot.
Yeah.
So this analogy works great for him. But, you know, your coach is kind of like a mentor to you. They encourage you, they champion you, they cheer for you. And so you might not be the bio parent, but you for sure are all those things.
Absolutely. And the important part about a coach, especially if anybody else has played on sport teams, they have a significant impact on your life. I can think about 4 or 5 coaches that I've had over the course of my life, and I still call them coach and still respect them.
Yeah.
And want them to know that I'm doing well in life, right?
Because they are, like we were saying, like they are such a primary voice. I think as a coach, there's some things that you can definitely celebrate as life goes on. And I think an important note is that celebrating their relationship and kind of championing that with their bio parent is really important. So what that could look like was, oh wow, that was really awesome that you got to do this with your mom today. Or that was cool that you got this gift from your dad. Like that was really thoughtful of him. And so you're using your words to help facilitate that relationship.
So let's talk about discipline when it comes to being a coach.
Yes.
That it can be tough, and it's really important to have some predetermined rules for the house so that they're not in question when maybe the other parent isn't there.
Right. Versus like, here's the Stockton, well, that's not how we did it before, or Traylor's did it this way, Stockton's did it that way. Coming together, putting those in place.
Absolutely. And I think those will change and morph over time because you're not going to know what all those rules are. And not that it's all about having a million rules.
Right.
But you need to know what the basic ones are. And that will just make that job so much easier.
And I think we did it a little at a time too. So it's not like, okay, the first day you all move in together, sit down, have a family meeting. Here's everything you need to know.
Right.
Sometimes you just figure it out as you go because somebody messed up and then you're like, ooh, yeah, what are we going to do about that? Or how are we going to handle that?
The tough parts are when things happen and one of the spouses isn't there.
Right.
So one of the things that we said early on was when it comes to discipline, we really tried to keep the discipline with the bio parent, right? So that just takes out a whole lot of strife and just challenges. But if we're gone, we already know what the rules are.
Right.
And we try to use technology as best we can.
Yeah, give some examples of how we do that.
So I can tell you there's been numerous times that I've been at work and I get a text message, hey, can you FaceTime real quick? And so I'll pull up my phone in my office and I am talking to Michelle, one of my bio kids, around whatever's happening, and I'm able to talk truth into that moment around, guys, remember, this is the rule, this is the consequence. Michelle's going to have you do X, Y, or Z, but it's in terms of that issue and that discipline, it's coming from quote unquote my authority or guess my relationship. But one of the things we did set up early on was that no matter what, at the end of the day, there are 2 adults here in this house that love and cherish each of the kids that are in here. So no matter what, if I say, something needs to happen, or Michelle says something that needs to happen, they need to respect that adult. Not because they're a parent, but because they're a loving adult in the house.
That's so good. And to your point about that, like I try to leverage my influence and my relational authority that I have with whichever kid that is as much as I possibly can, to use that as like the very last resort. So that's not like my first instinct, like when I'm working with a kid or when we're correcting or whatever. That's usually, okay, we've tried A, B, C, and D, and now we're on the next plan. All right, so the next one, number 2, is you might not be the biological parent, but you are a counselor. So that's the second C. First, we talked about the coach. You're a counselor in the home. I don't know if you've been to counseling. I've done a lot of counseling.
So have I.
And sometimes I joke that a blended family feels like an indefinite counseling session.
We do a lot of counseling here between the two of us. We really do.
I feel like we do. I feel like it's a never-ending counseling session.
Every week. No, it is. It's consistent.
Well, I think that is something you mentioned on an earlier episode about blended families coming from pain,
brokenness,
and pain.
Brokenness, yeah.
And so it is like everyone, and just the sheer number of people in the home. So now you've kind of got everything increased, and so it is. It's important work. Okay, so the second role as a step parent is you're a counselor. And I don't know if you've been to counseling or how much counseling you've done. I've done a lot of counseling, actually. You've done some counseling.
I've done quite a bit.
And it pretty much feels like you're in an unending counseling session living in a blended family. Maybe you feel that? Tell me I'm not the only one. Because I think what you were saying a couple episodes ago was that blended families come from a place of pain and hurt, right? Everything that's kind of prefaced it.
Right.
So, and then you just tack on the number of people that are in our household, and so kind of all of that is just expounded.
Yeah, and then all the different nuances on top of that. So everything that you were dealing with before,
right?
Then lumping on everything that you're dealing with new living arrangements, new friendships,
new birth order,
new rules, right? Just all that stuff. It's a lot.
It is.
It really is a lot.
Yeah.
And we spend a lot of time asking a lot of questions.
Yep, we do. And I think as you're considering this role of being a counselor, I think starting out, making sure you're investing in that relationship, like I was talking about earlier in this episode today, making sure that that's really strong, because you will be seen as a safe place. And I think having that role and wearing that hat of a counselor, it's so important for the kids to know that you're a safe person and that you have empathy for them. So
how do you feel if they are not going to you right away with some things?
I mean, that is a little hard sometimes, because especially like with our situation, because I do spend a lot of time with the step kids. So it's hard to then sometimes see them like emotionally then like still go to you. But I understand what's going on.
Right.
So I try not to like do a deep dive into my feelings too much. But I think the more that I've been in this and the stronger the individual relationships are, I think especially with the teenagers, because I do feel like now they come to both of us kind of at the same time, we'll be downstairs and they'll come up and kind of give a recap of the day, or I'm struggling with this friendship, or I'm struggling with this girlfriend, or whatever.
Right.
So I think it's an easy place to get stuck with your feelings, but just know that was the relationship that was the strongest. Like that's the one that's been there. So that's a natural. So if that's happening for you, like that's okay. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
so Channing.
Yeah, do it, because he can send me over the edge sometimes.
He can get really frustrated. Like he gets really worked up.
I love that kid to death, but sometimes like it's just like
he just has a high level of anxiety.
Yes,
right, and
which I can totally relate to.
Yeah.
He's probably out of all 6 of them the child I relate to the most.
Yeah, I can see that.
He's not a child; he's a grown man.
Right.
But,
yeah. Right.
But he can say things out of anger, like you were saying, and say random wide sweeping statements, and then I just take them as fact and just hang on to them. Make myself cozy with those awful feelings. Just start having, a whole separate conversation in my head about it. Start making evaluations about myself. What a bad job I'm doing. And all of that. And I think something that I heard was so helpful, and I'll share it with you. So they said, don't believe everything you see when it comes to teenagers. Like, you have to really know what's happening there and see it for take it for face value of what it actually is. Like, don't believe everything you see. Because sometimes we joke about, like, seeing these glimmers of hope and, like, wow, like, they're making so much progress and they're doing well here and here. And then you'll have these days where you just think it's over. It's a wreck. It's a wrap. And it's not. I'm still learning. I'm still in progress. I'm still in progress with that. All right, so you're a counselor. Other times throughout the day, that would be good kind of, I'll say, like, points, connecting points where you can be kind of checking in on them. I would say it would be like dinner time and bedtime.
Yeah, those are great times.
Leverage those times. What do we get out of that?
Well, I guess we get good questionings in, right? Because we kind of have a captive audience. And
let's be honest, they're not going anywhere.
Right. And it also tends to be where they tend to be a little bit more apt to be reflecting on their day or their feelings. And so some of the tearful times kind of tend to come out there where they're missing the other parent or they're feeling the loss of something like that. Those types of things tend to come out.
They do.
At bedtime.
Yeah. So use those opportunities wisely to talk and ask questions and answer questions and pray and all those things. Right. I think it's always important to validate their feelings, especially when there is a larger life situation that's happening. I think that's one thing that I am able to bring to our family is just like a side of empathy.
I'm not good at empathy.
I know. We know if you know him in real life. You're great at a lot of things.
I'm not good at empathy.
It just takes you a little bit longer to get there.
That's why I married you. You can take all my empathy for me.
I'll give all the empathy. Start a line. Create a line. I'm handing it out. But I think as a counselor, you can then kind of relate to them in those ways. All right, let's talk about the next one. So you're, as a step parent, you're not the biological parent, but you are a connector.
This is an important one, and I think this is one that the other two are important. This one, I think, has the potential to set your kids and your stepkids up for the best level of healing possible. And I think we're talking specifically about being a connector to the other bio parent. And that is something that I think everybody struggles with. It's hard because there's been a divorce, there's been a breakup, and there's all kinds of emotions that are in there.
Yep.
And we say it that we're supposed to be keep the kids out of the middle of it. It's a whole other thing to do it.
Right.
And I think if you can really be the one to support and drive those connections, and to your point from earlier about being the coach, celebrating some of those connecting points, I think that just sets your kids up for healing, feeling safe, and feeling loved, and just not feeling like they're getting pulled back and forth.
Right.
Because I've never gone through it, I don't think
Me neither.
and we don't know what it is. Neither one of us have gone through that, and but you can see it when you make a mistake, and because we haven't been perfect with it.
Right.
But that is certainly a guiding principle I think that we really have tried to instill.
One of the most profound things that you said to me very early on was that part of our responsibility is setting them up to be able to forgive whatever hurts they have with that bio parent. And I just thought that was really powerful because I think that carries a lot of weight and meaning to our work, right?
Yeah, and I think we get so wrapped up in ourselves, we forget that this isn't about us. It really is not about us.
Hard.
It really is about them and their healing, because we're probably, or we should be, if we've done the work, we should be a little further in our healing than they are. And our job is to lead them out of the hurt and the pain, and to healing.
Right. It is it is so hard, you know, because it takes a lot of dying to self, like what you wish you could say, holding your tongue, holding back tears, like making sure, you know, we're having a unified front, even if we're having a disagreement about something, like on the back end of things, and just really putting not just that connection, we'll talk about some other connections too, but like putting those connections with them first. And I mean, blending is emotional. If you're blending, you know, like it's full of, I mean, just from day to day. And so sometimes you just don't feel like it. You just don't want to. It's too hard. You did it yesterday. Why do I got to do it again today? Right. You know? So I think after divorce, you know, it can get sticky with extended family too. Like maybe it's aunts, uncles, grandparents. And I think helping them maintain a connection to those relatives too is really important for your role. You know, that depending on everybody's situation might be different, but we have so much technology these days. Like there's time where we, you know, have the kids, it's, you know, they don't know, they're kids. And so you have to be the one that kind of helps set that up. Like, hey, why don't you FaceTime or give them little prompts or reminders, you know, so that you can kind of keep those connections going. And, you know, it's not always easy on my side, you know, from my side of things. And if you go to my website, MichelleStocktonTraylor.com, you can read more about my story, because we have very, very different backstories of how we got to divorce and ultimately to healing and to where we are now. But for my two bio kids, just keeping that relationship going with their extended family is a choice that I had to make. And it could be really easy to be like, no, it's awkward, or I don't know what to say, or those kind of things. But like you were saying, like it's important for them, and those are still adults that love them and that care about them.
Absolutely.
And so to just, you know, keep connected with them.
Absolutely.
What about their connection to God?
I mean, it's so important. I mean, it's one of the guiding principles we talked about last week in terms of creating a rhythm.
Yeah.
But that is, again, another part of their healing. Things like getting them involved, connecting them to a youth group. Again, that helps to grow the circle. Some of the things we've already talked about, but those connection points, again, our voices only last so long, especially the older they get, and they need some reassurances that they're not the only ones, or that other people love them and are investing in them, and you know, connecting them to the youth group, to the church, to you know, I think we have some different things that we do during some of our bedtime routines. Is, hey, it's time to, you know, you need to read a Bible story, or you know, we certainly take some time to pray. We pray for each other sometimes. You know, sometimes it's just quick. Hey, you know, we're in and out. You know, right? We're just busy and we're trying to get the kids to bed. But the times where we have each other, we take the time to pray as a group, as a family. Man, those are just they're sweet, sweet times.
And if I'm working with like a kid one-on-one who's had a bad day, or I don't know, maybe going through something with a friend, or something happened at school, you know, I'm able to kind of bring in, you know, things from scripture, or things about like what God thinks about them, or what God says about them, and just help them in that way. So like, I know I'm not their mom, but I'm able to kind of help them walk through that, and kind of, I guess that's just what shepherding is, right? Yeah. You're pointing them back to God. Yeah. Another way you could be a connector would be to help them connect with their friends. It's so important as they grow, like those friendships really around 4th grade, I would say they just become so important to them. And so I guess I'm just speaking for me, because this is more of like something that I do for us and our family, but just helping to get that on the calendar for them, and like, okay, I know I'm not your mom, but let me help you like have time with your friends. And that's something that's within my power is not maybe the right word, but like jurisdiction or something. I don't know what the right word is for part of my role. Right. And so I'm like, okay, well, let's do that. Or let's, you know, so-and-so invited you, or you got invited to a birthday party, or, and making those things happen, and getting the birthday gift, and saying, okay, let's do this. And, you know, so, I mean, that part of my role I like. I like those social things.
And event planning and
yes, all those things. Listen, all of these roles are so important today because they all involve a choice. Like, you have to choose these, and it's the hard work that we talk about. If you want the lasting relationship, if you want to truly make an investment and a deposit in them and to make sure that your relationship is strong and strengthened, like, you have to just choose what that's going to be. And so I would encourage you today. So we had those three roles, right? So we had coach, we had counselor, and we had connector. Those might not be what you end up writing down for you and your family and your situation, but I would encourage you to reflect on it and to think through like what you bring to the table, where your gifts are, like your specific dynamic, and to figure out what that is, because it is going to help save a ton of time in pain and hurt and frustration in it. And knowing your role, I think, is going to be a huge key to your blending success. We wish you guys all the best. Here's an idea for you. We were trying to work on helping our kids be more independent and serving themselves because, let's be honest, so many questions happen in this house around food. Can we have a snack? Can we do this? Is it da-da-da-da-da? So now in the mornings, this area that used to be cluttered with mail and junk is turned into a breakfast area so the kids can come downstairs and get their own cereal in the morning. We added the toaster and the bread so they can fix themselves breakfast on their own. Yes! Another thing that's helpful is when you have drink containers that have spouts so that they can serve themselves versus pouring things out of big containers. And I got one more for you. So we've been creating a rhythm of having dinner together every night, and we just made this question jar. So all the kids took turns writing questions in here, and we're gonna take one every night and tell us something interesting that happened today. Here's one question. Somebody else wrote, I can pre-plan my answers this way. What's your favorite word? I know what it's not. Mom, 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 mom. Hope these are helpful.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us today.
Yeah.
Michelle, those are some great hacks.
Thank you.
So let's recap. Today's big idea is know your role. So what does the Bible say about that? In Hebrews 3:13, the Bible says, "But encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness."
That's so important because the enemy has one trick, and he lies, and he will deceive us into believing all sorts of things like what I'm doing here isn't important, I'm not their real mom, I have no influence. It could be a lot of different things. But the second we believe those things, we miss out on the instruction, which is to encourage each other daily.
So continue the conversation online. We'd love for you to visit us online at blendinglikebosses.com.
Yeah.
Check out our shop, buy some merch, help support the show. And thanks so much for joining, and we will see you next time. Have a great day.